everyone. Welcome to Just Say It, the podcast by communicators for communicators. On this show, we have in-depth conversations with journalists, messaging experts, designers, marketers, leaders, and managers, and unpack their wisdom and experience. Each episode is designed for strategic communicators looking to level up and advance their careers. I'm your host, Rochelle Bedell. Michael Brito is a data-driven digital marketing strategist, constantly thinking of innovative ways to reach audiences online with content, programs, campaigns, and stories that matter. Michael has extensive experience in the digital marketing industry, including working as a social media strategist at Intel, senior vice president for social business strategy at Edelman Digital, head of social marketing for the W20 Group, senior vice president of the U.S. digital operations for Lewis Pulse, and adjunct professor at UC Berkeley and San Jose State University. Michael currently works as global head of analytics at Zeno Group with a passion for helping clients reach their target audience. He has written 2 books, his most recent one titled Smart Business, Social Business, and Your Brand, the Next Media Company, and given a TEDx talk titled What's Trending is You, covering the importance of personal branding in the digital age. Today, we're going to be talking with Michael Brito about digital branding and the importance of analytics. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was definitely a mouthful. Thank you.
So Michael, based on your current work, it's clear that analytics is the backbone of everything you do, but you haven't always been into analytics. Tell us a little bit about your early career and what drove you to do what you're doing now.
Well, it's kind of ironic. I failed algebra in high school a couple times, actually. Hated math early in my career because I didn't really understand it. And so I remember I was in a meeting. I was at Intel, a meeting with marketing and PR and everybody else. And we were kind of going around the table, if you will. And we were all talking with the CMO, talking about what we were planning to do to measure the effectiveness of this campaign. And on the PR side, they said something along the lines of, we're going to measure share of voice or how many, articles were picked up. And I remember telling myself and laughing because I just felt like it was such an easy job and how much I wanted to be in that role because I didn't want to have to go deep into the analytics because I was afraid of it. I was able to get by for years because, again, having a team and having support staff around me who were really smart with analytics, I kind of just never really delved into it. It wasn't something that was top of mind for me. It wasn't until about, 10 years ago when I really started to embrace data. But for a long time, I felt like I was faking it, just because, again, I was afraid of it. I didn't want to, get my hands dirty and start using Excel. Just numbers were never my thing. So, but it's definitely helped kind of build a path for me to think about data and use it as a way to make smarter decisions for both myself and for my clients.
I love that. So tell me, what kind of data are you looking at now? Like what kind of measurements are you looking at? What does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
And so when I look at data, I look at it in 2 different ways. On the left, you have measurement and performance. So it's like you have a campaign in the market. It could be an earned media campaign, PR. It could be a creative campaign or an integrated campaign. The data on that side is really about measuring how effective, how many clicks there were, how many articles there were, the impact of those stories, engagement, audience growth. That is on the left. And that is a lot of what we do at the agency. On the right, it's really about what I would call the upfront research and analytics. And that is really meant to inform a program and campaign. So when we're looking at audience data, looking at media data, kind of landscape analysis to understand, what's being said about this topic by these audiences, which media publications are really driving impact related to 5G or DE&I or digital transformation or whatever the kind of the topics that may be important to our clients. And so a lot of it is similar data, but they're kind of used different. One is measuring the performance. The other is looking for white space. And personally, I prefer the white space because that's really where the innovation comes in when it comes to understanding audiences and understanding data. Typically, from my standpoint, and one that I kind of hold true to what we do at the agency and what I do personally is understanding people and audiences. And so when I say that, I mean a Gen Z audience or a Gen Alpha audience or IT decision makers or influencers or, designers or developers or millennials in Oregon who wear Birkenstocks and don't wear deodorant. It could be any type of audience that we're talking about, understanding who they are, their characteristics, their values, their content, what they like, what they don't like. That to me is really what differentiates a marketing campaign that is effective and one that really kind of over indexes in, maximizing the performance of that program.
So tell me, I'm really interested in hearing a concrete example of where you use this kind of data. But first, I have a question because I've been researching brands and how to brand and really build an authentic brand. And there's these 2 competing thoughts that I've been looking at. One is really understanding your audience, right? Understanding who they are, what they do, how they do, so that you can tailor this campaign or tailor your brand around that. But then the other piece is really understanding who you are as a brand and really leaning into that. And so it feels to me like there's this push and pull. And how do you find that balance? What is it? Because one, you really want to be authentic to your brand because that's really key. If you start just chasing the trends, you're going to lose yourself in that and maybe not be relevant because you're not being authentic. But on the other hand, you have to know your audience and somewhat cater to of that too? What's that balance?
That's a really good question. And I don't think that's one that's asked enough by people who are work in marketing in corporate or at the agency, because a lot of times it's like, this is our brand, this is our messaging, this is what we align to, and we're going to go out and push messages in the marketplace. And then oftentimes they kind of scratch their head later and say, I wonder why this campaign didn't perform to what we expected. There's a model, and I wish I could show you this, and certainly I'll email it to you later, but there's a model that I developed over the years it's kind of like, if you think about supply and demand from a brand relevancy standpoint, if you think about kind of two spectrum, on the right you have supply, and on the left you have demand. And on the left, it's the demand of the audience. So if you're looking at an audience like your customers or prospects or the media or influencers, it's understanding what is demanding their attention, right? What trends, what topics, what channels? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it both? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter? But once you kind of get a snapshot of that demand, then you have to ask yourself, am I meeting the demand of my audience with my supply of stories or content or messaging or campaigns or channels? Are we in the same channel as our audiences? And so once you understand what that is, you can see the gaps. You can see that white space. And at that point is when you have to make that decision of, okay, well, if the audience is talking about this and this is important to them, but our brand is over here and we talk about it in a different way, we solve a particular problem a different way. You have to ask yourself, do we have enough money to kind of create a campaign and drive awareness so that we bring that audience into conversation with us? Or are we going to adapt our messaging so that our conversation is more relevant to the one that's already being had with our current audience? And so I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. It's really a balance, a delicate balance of being able to align your messaging and kind of differently so that it is more relevant to your audience. Or if you're Apple, or you're some of these large brand campaigns where they're spending millions of dollars a month, in advertising, and, it doesn't matter. You are the trend spotter. You create the trends and you bring people into your ecosystem. Most brands don't have that. They don't have that same level of prestige and affinity that, a Nike or an Apple does. So there's definitely a balance when you're planning for your campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And I think it's a really interesting analogy about bringing your brand to the people a little bit, like shifting it slightly versus trying to bring people to your brand. The one example that I was reading about was about Barney's back in the day before they were a big department store, right? They were more working in not secondhand clothing, but clothing that wasn't super trendy, super relevant. They built this other store right next to them that did the high-end brand. And so here they were talking about being super authentic to who you are, but yet they're talking about having these two disparate pieces of their store right next to each other while they're trying to shift who they are. And to me, I was like, that doesn't make sense. You're not living what you're saying here about just being authentic, right? There's interplay.
It's kind of like Geico, right? I mean, Geico, I'm not a customer of Geico. I probably never will be. But if you look at some of their advertising and and these are just campaigns, but I can't even really think about like, what does the brand stand for? Like a Geico brand. I know they do car insurance. They probably do home insurance and other things, but they have, a gecko, right? That is a talking gecko with a British accent. Then they had the Neanderthals, right? Who would just say stupid things. I realized that there's probably some insight or data that's saying, adapt to this and this is a campaign for you. But there's so many for them, at least. And that's one of a few examples I think of off the top of my head where, they have all these disparate campaigns and messaging that don't align with each other whatsoever. And to me personally, I can't interact with that. I don't find it relevant to me as a person and, not enough to want to explore changing my car insurance. So, but again, it is a kind of a balance between how flexible, because some CMOs don't want that flexibility. They have invested a significant amount of money into their messaging and they will not shift whatsoever. And those are the ones that I think aren't as successful as they could be if they were to look at audience data.
So tell me, do you have an example you can share with us where audience data made all the difference? Like you looked at the audience, you saw who they were, and you created this campaign that was really quite successful because you knew who the audience was. I mean, I'm sure you have a bazillion, but do you have one that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I'll just talk about a couple. Well, one specifically, it was a B2B company in the automation space, and they were talking and using language like digital workplace was kind of a keyword, a hashtag. It's kind of a buzzword as well. And it was even before the pandemic happened, and people were using, this idea of hybrid workforce and hybrid workplace as a way to talk about people working remote. And this company was basically an automation company, and they would build software that would allow you to automate repetitive things. So if you're working in different systems and logging in and logging out and copying and pasting data from Excel to a different platform, it would automate that for you. So you would kind of train it to do that. And it really took out kind of the repetition of boring kind of everyday work and let people kind of do better, more innovative, creative thinking within their customer base. And so they were using these keywords, and a lot of their language and messaging was around that, and did an analysis of their audience. And their audience were CIOs and IT decision makers. So these are people who work within large companies who are making decisions based on what type of software to implement, to deploy across their organization. Talking about $1 million deals here. And so when we analyzed the CIOs and IT decision makers, we found out that they were using similar language in their content and when they were publishing on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on other platforms. But when they were talking about digital workplace, they were talking about it in a different way. And there were even other companies in the kind of the HR kind of realm that were using the same language, and they were kind of using it within the context of people. And, it was before the hybrid workforce and before the pandemic. So there was still a high percentage of people who were working remotely, but not everybody at that time. And so they were talking about it through the lens of HR and learning and development, kind of workplace trends. Whereas the automation company were using the same language, but it really wasn't the same thing. And when we told them that, we helped them kind of come up with some different messaging around digital workforce. So it was kind of a shift in messaging, and it was a shift in even everything from like headlines to blog posts to even hashtags. They were using adopted new language that was a little bit more relevant to the audience that we're trying to reach versus using similar language to an HR audience, which again, they weren't thinking about automation. They were talking about, and the digital workforce or workplace rather, who were working remotely and using collaboration software to communicate, through Teams and Zoom and things like that. So one small example of how audience data can kind of shift messaging. One more, and this is a lot faster. We looked at an audience of, and these were moms who were, and I don't remember the exact demographic, but we built an audience of moms who were interested in, working out and fitness, and they shopped at Whole Foods, and, they were living in the suburbs, and they drove Priuses and things like that. Well, the client wanted to target certain publications for not just for pitching media for PR, but also for buying media. And they wanted to do this large sponsorship with, I want to say it was like Entertainment Tonight or Entertainment Weekly. And what we found was that this particular audience, they actually liked sites like, and I can't think of the name of the site. It's a very popular one. Oh, Refinery 29, right? Which is kind of like this consumer lifestyle, fashion, trend, at home, a lot of different things, recipes even. And what we found that the audience over-indexed in following Refinery 29, as well as sharing content from that site. And it was a huge disconnect, meaning a high percentage of that audience liked, commented, and shared content Refinery 29 when you compared it to kind of a general population. So when they over-index, that just simply means that they like it a lot more than your average person. So that was extremely insightful, and it really changed the way that they decided to shift the PR strategy as well as, who they wanted to do a sponsorship with.
So how do you shift that PR strategy? Do you work to get content that's on Refinery 29 so that it's something that these people are seeing and sharing? How do you shift it?
Right. How is that actionable, right? Is what you're asking. And that's a great question, because it wasn't just Refinery 29. It was like top 10 consumer lifestyle media publications, and Entertainment Weekly wasn't even in the top 10. And that was one that they wanted to do an exclusive with from a PR perspective. So we gave them the list, and that then became the media list for the PR team. The PR team said, okay, well, we don't know any journalists in these media publications. We know a few here. And then they started pitching those particular media publications that the audience over-indexed in. Plus, I think they ended up doing a large brand activation where there was sponsored content. They bought display advertising on Refinery 29, as well as a couple of the other top 10. So it wasn't like a last minute analysis. This was done like a few months before launch of the campaign. So it wasn't like a huge pivot, a difference in prioritizing. And there was some slight shifting, but it wasn't like, oh my God, we need to stop everything here and migrate over here, because they did it, with plenty of lead time.
Which is so cool, because with that data, it's possible, and I don't know if it was true with this campaign, but if you're looking at publishing in Entertainment Weekly or trying to get an ad or content in that's probably a lot more expensive than maybe a lower tier magazine that your viewers are paying more attention to.
100%.
So let's shift a little bit. From a digital marketing perspective, it can be challenging for a brand to get a foothold or stand out from the competition. What methods do you use to help brands stand out from their competitors?
That's a great question. I mean, I go back to the supply and demand model. And that is when you kind of plot the data using that supply and demand model, you're looking at different audiences, right? You're looking at your target audience, the millennials, IT decision makers, CIOs, whoever you are targeting. It could be the media, so, traditional media, journalists, and then an influencer group as well. And so again, asking yourself, are we meeting the demand of the audience with our supply of content? Now, what's the beauty about data is that you can do the same analysis with your competitors. So you can look at the audience and you can shift that however you'd like or leave it the same, but then do the analysis of your competitors. And then you'll be able to answer the question of, is my competitors, are they meeting the demand of their audience with their supply of content? And usually they're not. Usually there's big gaps of content, campaigns, and creative. And so, I don't really look at like how many followers they have on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and TikTok. I mean, that might be a metric that I might just track over time, but that's not very actionable, right? I want to look at the types of content and campaigns that are in market for our competitors, and then the demand of the audience over here, and try to figure out, are they actually meeting that demand? And if not, again, that's an open opportunity for us as a brand. Or if they are, well, then we need to figure out a way to tell the story better than our competitors are doing.
I'd be interested in hearing what some of the gaps that you found. I feel like it's got to be so different for each and every brand. I was discussing with you on a previous conversation, I was kind of looking at some of the content we were working on in my work and really kind of looking at where my audience was at. And we actually did look at those very basic numbers. That's where we're starting right now. It's like, what channels is our audience on? And we're not doing marketing. Ours is more informative. But even just in looking at those those numbers, I found that we're reaching many more people right now on Facebook than we are on Instagram. And on Instagram posts, we're reaching many more people than we are on Instagram Reels. And if you follow the trends and things like that, we should all be on Reels. Reels is where it's at. TikTok is where it's at. But for my company, that's not where my audience is. Do you have an example where you found something similar, where you just found this gap that was really enlightening and was able to make the difference in your campaign?
I mean, I remember years ago, I was at a conference. I want to say this was 2012, maybe 2013. I was speaking at the conference and this guy comes up to me afterward and said, I don't know if, we should be on Twitter or not. I don't know if my audience is there. And so I said, well, let's take a look. And so, I mean, again, it was an anecdotal look, and pulled up my laptop and went to Twitter search. And I just searched for, I think if I remember correctly, it was a construction management company. So they would supply construction hats. They were a supplier to these large companies who are, building buildings and residential homes. And you would go there to buy hard hats and like vests and boots and anything related to construction gear and equipment. And I said, well, let's take a look. So we did a couple of searches and found that there was a huge community of people, buyers and influencers and even media companies who were talking about and writing about construction management. And I'm not sure if that's the right kind of descriptor of that category, construction management, maybe construction supply. And again, this was 10 years ago. Again, a very basic search. And I did this very same thing in TikTok just a few weeks ago for a client who is in B2B. And they basically are targeting DevOps engineers. These are engineers who are development work and then operations. And that's a term called DevOps. And I just said, look, let's just try a quick hashtag search in TikTok, and looked up DevOps. And there were thousands of people using this hashtag. And it wasn't like irrelevant usage. I mean, these were like engineers talking about, a day in the life of a DevOps engineer, or 5 things that irritates a DevOps engineer, like even little things like that. Like just do a quick search. Is there engagement? And it's a little bit different than looking at like demographics, right? I mean, again, if you're a local brand and you're in Gilroy or Morgan Hill or Salinas, obviously, it doesn't matter what people are saying in New York, right? What matters is that people are talking about in your local community. So it kind of depends upon what your business is and what you want to do. And there's a lot of ways that you can just use basic searching and even Google or searching within platform to see, is there even a conversation related to what we do as a business? And if there is, how do we add value to that conversation?
And that leads in really nicely into our next topic that we wanted to look at, which, with ever evolving technology, it's really easy to get sucked into trying to do everything and be everywhere. So for those who are just starting out in digital marketing or preparing a new campaign or even revamping an old campaign, where do you recommend they start?
Well, I would say start off where you are already seeing success. And I've seen too many companies who say, oh my God, here's Snapchat. Let's launch a Snapchat channel. Oh my God, here's TikTok. Let's launch a TikTok channel. And the problem with that kind of approach is it's great to kind of get in early, but the challenge is being able to create content that is applicable to that community and designed for that platform. Different things that brands need to think about. Like, do we have a community manager? Do we have a content person? Do we have enough creative content and storytelling to last, all year? And if not, how are we going to supplement that? Are we going to use freelancers? Do we have enough bandwidth to promote content, right? You can't just post content organically and expect a ton of engagement or a ton of audience growth. It used to work years ago, but now these aren't just social media platforms. These are media platforms. And so there's a significant amount of paid spend needed to, promote and amplify content or, boost content, if you will, for lack of a better term, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and TikTok and Snapchat. So without that kind of planning, that holistic look at who we are as a business, just start with what you already have. And if you do have those other resources, then, launch into a new channel, but make sure you do enough planning so that you have, 6 months later, like, oh my God, what do we post next? We ran out of ideas, or we ran out of money, we ran out of budget, we don't have a graphic designer anymore, or a video editor. Those are things that a lot of times you don't think about upfront. And if you do, you'll just be well equipped for longer term planning and longer term success in those channels.
There was an analogy that I was told quite a few years ago when I was first starting out with social media, managing a brand on social media. And they said, opening up a new social media channel is like getting a new puppy. So be really careful, because there's all this time and care and effort that goes into each and every social media channel. And oftentimes people who oversee the people who are managing the content or creating the content don't realize the time and effort that it takes. So it's easy to say, oh, we need to get on this channel. We need to get on this channel. We should be over here. But there's a lot of time and effort that goes into each and every single one.
Very true.
So with that, the digital marketing world is constantly changing. So we have all these new channels like we talked about. We have TikTok, we have Reels, new methods. In the last year alone, we see the rise of short form video content, and we keep hearing about the metaverse and AI. What should every person working in the digital marketing field stop doing? And conversely, what should they start doing?
I think we hit on a few points already. Stop doing kind of blanket messaging across all channels. In other words, don't just post the same content in every channel the same exact way. And so I think you can have similar content, but adapt it, right? Adapt it to the channel, adapt the creative, because different creative performs better. You wouldn't want to post a 1920 by 1080 video on Instagram. It should be a perfect square, 1:1 ratio. So it's things like that marketers should stop doing. What they should start doing is, before the launch of a campaign, campaign or as you're preparing for, quarterly planning or, an annual planning, do some research. Now, I say that like you can just go to Google and start finding information. And to a point you can, but try to understand audiences a little bit more, understand what makes them tick, what their affinities are, what their content preferences are, what their media consumption habits are. Use it as a way to be that North Star for the content and the creative that you publish and post. Going back to what we said earlier about alignment though, right? It has to be relevant to your business and brand, and then also topically relevant to your audiences. So spend more time doing that upfront audience work. Again, I feel funny still today saying that just because for years I ignored it and avoided it like the plague because I was afraid of it. But, again, learning how to take big data and making it small and actionable really was the key to my success over the last 10 years. And that's really what helped me get to where I am today. And so if you can learn that trick, the art of analytics versus the science of analytics, that to me will help you launch better campaigns that are more effective and produce the results that you expect.
So how can a brand learn more about their audience? So I know, we've talked before about you can look at how your audience is interacting with your brand, right? You can look at feedback that they're giving you directly. You can look at comments that they're making on social. But how do you find out what they're doing when they're not interacting with your brand?
That's a great question. I think it goes beyond owned media, right? So it's very easy to go to my Facebook page or LinkedIn page or Instagram, TikTok, Twitter to see who my followers are, right? You can go there, you can scroll through your followers with the exception of, I think, Facebook. But for the most part, you can scroll through your followers. You can see who they are. You can see names. Now, again, you have to be careful with that just because of privacy issues, but you can understand based on the content you're publishing, what they like, what they don't like, what kind of content resonates, what doesn't. Those are all, I wouldn't call those vanity metrics. I would call those, owned media metrics, right? Those are metrics based on what you publish, right, on the platform, the reaction that your audience has of that content. And that just tells a very small story of, what they like and what they don't like based on the mood that they're in that day. So for me, it's more about first identifying and documenting your audience. Who is your audience? Are they residents of Morgan Hill? Okay, well, let's start there. Or are they residents of San Jose? Or do they live in California, right? Do you service a business that is just in California? And in what parts of California? Rural, city, central, etc. But understanding who they are and then building an audience of who they are. So if they are living in California, well, you can build an audience of people who self-identify being or living in California. But there's other kind of tricks of the trade, right? They don't say I live in California, but you can kind of use some different tactics like, do they follow, I don't know, the 49ers, the Oakland A's, and the Los Angeles Lakers, right? Those are my three favorite teams. Well, if they follow all three, then probably they're located somewhere in California. If they follow just the Lakers, there's a chance that they could not live in California because we know that people are fans of other, teams in different states. But if you use a few qualifiers, like, are they following the city of San Jose and do they follow the Sharks? So there's a few different things that you could do to kind of narrow that audience down. Once you do that, then analyze who they are. Probably going to be very different than analyzing just the people who are liking, commenting, and responding to your own content. From there, you can understand who their top media preferences, their demographics, their content, the themes and trends, topics that matter to them as a business or as an individual, rather, asking yourself if you're meeting that demand with your content.
And I'm assuming there must be tools out there, data tools that allow you to do these kinds of searches and narrow it down and then allow you to make the connections from the subgroup that you've created to what other kinds of things they're interested in.
There are tools. One of my favorite tools is Audience, spelled audience with an S. They do allow you to do that, as well as Brandwatch. Audiences do that as well. Allow you to add different parameters and qualifiers to build an audience. So using bio searches. So if you're targeting people who are interested in music and find handles with I love music or hip hop or country or, certain genres, there's like hundreds of ways to build audiences. Again, that to me is where I always start there because the insights when you do it that way are far more insightful and actionable than kind of just going off your gut or not even doing analysis at all and just publishing content to see what sticks.
So before we go into personal branding, I wanted to ask you about AI. So we talked about all these different channels, all the different types of content we can put on all the different channels, how we need to be tailoring it in different ways, which really can become overwhelming for a content creator, for a content manager. Tell me what you're seeing with AI and how you think marketers might be able to leverage AI to help make this process, I don't know, a little more efficient, a little bit easier, or do you think we just need to leave AI on the side and continue with the process as we have?
Well, we can't leave AI on the side. I mean, we're like weeks or months away from Armageddon, I think, with AI, machines, and robots. I'm kidding. But there is good use of AI, right? AI can help you buy media more effectively. You're paying large sums of money to buy paid search or display advertising. You can use AI to make sure that you're displaying the right ads at the right time. So AI is good from an efficiency standpoint. Also, if you think about ChatGPT, it just probably heard the news. It's basically a machine that writes content for you. There's a lot of AI copywriters out there that can create content. It could make marketers dumb because you're relying on a machine to write information. That's a good starting point, but there has to be kind of a human layer of analysis. I don't think we ignore it, but I don't think we rely on it, right? We still need to rely on human and, intuition intuition, experience, obviously analytics. But AI does help us to, automate certain things and to be more efficient when buying media, especially when you're, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, Google or, display network to reach, large audiences. AI can help save money and be more efficient with your bids and things like that. So don't ignore it, but don't rely on it either too much.
So do you think there's some potential to do your background research, put together kind of your idea, throw it into AI, have it spit out, I don't know, some sort of draft campaign, and then take that and make it better as a way to just like speed up the process, right?
What I thought about, and I've done this, start with AI and then adapt. But what you said was start your campaign or brainstorm your kind of messaging and campaign, throw it into AI, and then see what it comes back with, and then continue to refine it. I missed that first step, and I actually like that first step, which is start with some thoughts, some ideas, some campaign messaging, drop it into chat. I use Jasper.ai copywriting tool. They also do write ads as well, very similar to ChatGPT, and see what it comes up with, and then alter it and adapt it again. The thing with AI is they don't understand cultural relevance. They use what's already been published and they refine it and they spit it back to you. But you and I, we live and we see and we watch and we are experiencing and we are part of society. And that's something that AI cannot provide. Whatever your process is, the last piece of it should be, to your point, refining it based on cultural context and experience and intuition from a human.
So let's switch over into personal branding real quick. I know you're really passionate about personal branding. You spend a lot of time coaching people about personal branding, people and brands. Why is personal branding so important? Why is this a passion for you?
There have been instances in my career where I've really going hard on building my brand, and then I just kind of let it fall off the wayside and ignored it for a couple of years. And right now I'm back to the point where I'm trying to build it up again. But I think it's important for everyone for a lot of reasons, especially with students who are just getting into the workforce and they're trying to differentiate themselves from other students. I'm passionate about that because I've read too many resumes or looked at too many LinkedIn profiles that look the same. And there was no way for me to clearly differentiate one student from another. And so I think it's important for students to do that, just to get their foot in the door and get a phone call, right? There's things that you can do. As you get older and, you become more of a professional and have years of experience, I like to share thoughts and ideas. And that's the only reason why I do that. I don't build my brand to make money. Some people do. I like to share information. I like to share thought leadership. That's why I do it. It's important to me because it's reflective of who I am as a business professional, as someone in my agency who's a leader. I would say most people are really focused on personal branding, being invited to speak at conferences, launching a website, launching a podcast, monetizing it, right? They're monetizing their personal brand. I don't do that. I just like to talk and brainstorm and innovate ideas and thoughts and models and things like that. And that's important to me. And that's why personal branding is important to me.
So for someone looking to refresh their personal brand or to create one, they haven't done it before, where do you recommend they start? How do they start crafting that brand?
Start with LinkedIn. Is optimize your LinkedIn, write your title, write your summary, write your narrative. Don't post your bathroom selfie as your photo, but something better. And just post content in a sense of just have a point of view, right? Just make it a habit. And I'm kind of on this journey right now in the process of launching a TikTok page. And it's one that I've been neglecting for years because I'm not used to it. I'm not a user of TikTok, although I've been using it the last couple months to understand how it works and how people are using it. Another method, right? And I heard a quote, I can't remember who it was from, but the quote was something along the lines of short form video like TikTok and Instagram Reels is the gateway into long form content. So, I'm using TikTok and Instagram Reels, et cetera, as a way to bring people into my ecosystem around my LinkedIn newsletter, my blog and things like that. So it's pulling people in and distributing my content in different formats in the channels that I think might be relevant to that audience.
So we have a couple of questions that we like to ask at the end of each interview. Our first one is, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self when you were just getting started in your career, what would it be?
Just stop being afraid of using data. Early in my career, there weren't a lot of tools. Use data, but don't try to boil the ocean, right? Just take small data points. That's what I would have done. I'd be far more advanced. I might even be a data scientist by now if I did that. But I would say, don't be afraid of data. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of platforms out there. There's Excel that you can use, put formulas together and get information. There's a quote that I live by that I don't know if you can appreciate this or if you use Excel, but there was life before pivot tables and life after pivot tables. Life before pivot tables suck. Life after pivot tables, I have a lot more time. I'm not spending hours and hours in Excel like I used to. So that would be my advice, is just embrace it and learn from it.
Absolutely. Love it. Second question, what is one habit that you do daily that you would recommend to our listeners?
I would say that I try to wake up every day and I try to just be grateful that I woke up, right? Because there's a lot of times when some people don't wake up or they wake up in bad situations. Being grateful for waking up, that is kind of the start of my day, to where I can then just be appreciative of even the little things and not worry about things that used to worry me, like traffic or working or, 8 hours of conference calls. Like all those things are just part of life and and part of my life. But waking up, being grateful for waking up and being grateful for my family, that is motivation to just kind of get through each day and make the best of it and have a positive attitude.
Thank you so much. I love the gratitude and the gratitude practice. Thank you for joining us today. I love the conversation. It's been so great to talk with you. Michael provides digital marketing services through the Zeno Group. He also has a website and newsletter where you can learn everything you need to know about digital marketing. Michael, where can our listeners find you?
Britopian. I don't know where I got that name. It's Brito, my last name, Pian. It's pretty much my handle everywhere. It's also my website. And I'm pretty active on these channels as well. So when I get mentions or responses, I try to respond as well. So yeah, thank you so much. It was a great podcast. I'm really happy that you're doing this and excited to listen to further episodes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. We have additional resources and links in our show notes at justsayitcommunications.com. Transcripts are up on the website and the video is up on YouTube. My team is Andrea Casas-Tapete, Zara Momini, and Shinga Yoshimine. And my name is Rochelle Bedell. If you enjoyed this show, please like and share it. And don't forget to apply what you learn on the show. We hope you'll join us again soon for another conversation.